Let me say once again how grateful I am for all that has been shared leading up until this moment as well, as we take this journey towards greater relationship, storytelling, building upon, of course, a foundation that will help us to experience beloved community in so many different ways. The art, the symbolism, certainly has affected us throughout time, but we also need to understand the experiences of others. And certainly, as we have one at this portion, as our conversations have led us to this moment, I'm grateful to recognize and to welcome Stephanie Merlo. As she comes before us on today, she serves as the Community Outreach and Organization Director for Reclaiming the Monument. Her family history in South Texas deeply intertwines with the Juneteenth story through her great-great-great-grandfather, Charlie Brown, a formerly enslaved man who went on to become one of the first Black millionaires in Texas and helped establish Juneteenth as an annual celebration in his community. Today, she will be talking about the importance of the history of Juneteenth. So we welcome her at this moment.
Thank you so much, and what an honor to be here. I'm really excited to talk to you and kind of do some storytelling. That's what this is going to be, and share with you a lot of my family history and some of the things that I grew up learning and that I ended up being very, very proud of, especially as I got older and uncovered more and more stuff. So first, I'm just going to start off reading this. The people are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. That is the first line in Executive Order number 3, in which General Granger delivered on June 19th, 1865 in Galveston, which actually, fun fact, was written by a general that served under him, General Frederick Emory. Picture this. It's hot. It's June. You're doing what you have to do. You're doing the errands. Then there's a boat that comes where there are many soldiers, a lot of them from the colored troops. And here comes this man on horseback that comes off of this boat. They go set up down the street and they come back by in the middle of the town square. And they bring out this decree and they read it. And they read that first line and they continue it, reading from there. Imagine that feeling. Imagine that excitement. Imagine the fear that also went into that. Imagine the unknowing. Imagine where your family is now. Can you go see your family? How can I get to my family that was taken from me? These were the thoughts that were going through these individuals' mind. Now, I'm going to just share a little bit about that area outside of Galveston, Texas, which is where Juneteenth had all began. There were a few plantations that surrounded around Galveston or Rosenberg County down there in Texas. You had the Werner Hogg plantation. It's a name. You have the Sweeney plantation, which is a little bit further south. And you also have the Levi Jordan plantation. Levi Jordan plantation is said to be one of the worst ones around that, as they were very, very brutal to those who were enslaved there on that land. As horses rode down to the coast on the eastern part of Texas, news traveled through horseback, through foot, through telegraph, through train to San Antonio, Houston, Dallas, Austin, further down where I grew up in Brazoria County. That news landed in the hands of those from the Sweeney plantation, which is where my family came from, where they then read underneath the bois d'arc tree, horse apple tree, depends on what region you're from, and they read that order to those who were enslaved at the Sweeney plantation. To this day, that area still belongs to our family. We are still there. It has definitely been taken over a little bit more by like Dow Chemical. I'm sure all of y'all are aware of Dow, and Phillips 66. What used to stand there was that emancipation tree, is what we call it, the emancipation tree, which was sadly cut down 2016, where it has died. But there was an artist that did take this tree, and I really wish I had a picture of it that turned out well, because I wanted to show you all. But he took this tree, he flipped it upside down, and now you have the roots. So then he put this tree in 3 different parts. The first part of the tree is a boat, and it's sailing across these waters that are very rough. The third part of this tree is a family holding their loved ones, scared. Then the last part of the tree are the roots of those spirits who were formerly enslaved that are now free, whereas they are now being read, General Order number 3, underneath that Bois-d'Arc tree. And you see all of these former enslaved individuals standing in line, just waiting to be read this general order as they start into the new life that they now have. So a couple of the questions that a lot of people do ask is, well, did these plantation owners actually know about the Emancipation Proclamation? I mean, it happened 2 years ago, right? Somebody should have known. Communication wasn't that slow. So, of course, my answer is going to be yes. This is my theory, yes. But whenever you are making profit out of all of these individuals who are working those lands for you, you're not going to say anything until you have to, all right? And as that happened, and now that these slaves are now free, they are going to still make that profit, right? So after everybody gets this word at the Sweeney plantation, Burner Hogg plantation, Levi Jordan plantation, now these formerly enslaved folks are like, okay, now what are we gonna do? And this is an often common question. We don't know what happens to a lot of our ancestors, right? Well, they are now made to go get a job. They don't know how to do that. Have to find shelter. They don't know how to do that. So what was ended up happening around those areas in Texas where these former plantation owners were now going to go ahead, somewhat of an indentured servitude, just pay them maybe 4 cents and then charge them like 12, for just a place to stay. But it was one man who I'm proud to say is my great-great-great-grandfather, who was a freed slave from Virginia. And he got down there and he made himself a millionaire. Now, there are many stories that are going back and forth of how did that happen. Him as a biracial man, there's a lot of different stories that go around it. Did he get his money from his father that was up here in Virginia? Could be, as a biracial man, his father would have been, his father was white and was sleeping with one of his enslaved women. Did he get his money from there? We don't know. Did he get his money from his wife, who he married, who was also a former enslaved individual? Which is fun because, sorry, my voice is cracking, which is also a fun fact because he did buy the house of those who had owned his wife. He got his money, he bought the house and said, me and my wife are moving in. So that was kind of a slap in the face to them, but I'm here for it. Now, as he went down there, this man started to cut down cedar trees. And he started to take these cedar trees, and then he cut them down, put them on a raft, and sent them up the Brazos River. From there, those people would get those rafts, and they get that cedar tree, and they'd start building furniture. And they started to sell the furniture. And this is how Charlie Brown ended up making his fortune. But what was cool is that he ended up earning the first cotton mill down there as well as a black man, sugar mill as well. And all of this was very unheard of down there, but he also gave a job to anybody who needed it. Black, white, Hispanic. You needed a job, I will give it to you. This was a very generous person. But of course, generosity it can only get you so far. And people get greedy. So what ended up happening as Charlie Brown started to expand his wealth and expand his generosity, he was kidnapped by those who were KKK members within the area. He was beaten. He was forced to sign over some of the mineral rights from the land that he did own. As that was happening, the Brown families, the money started to diminish. And even to this day, I believe there's only 15 acres that we have left to our name out of the 3,000 that we had. Now, of course, we are a very big family. The Brown family, I can't even count on one hand how many cousins I have. It's enormous. We are out there. And, but I wanted to share that story with you. Now, as Charlie Brown and as many other slaves are free, again, I touched on this a little bit ago. When you are free, one of the things that you want to do is look for your family. You are sitting there in the harbor of Galveston, which was definitely a main harbor during, as slaves were coming in from the port and sold. Your daughter's being taken away, your son's being taken away, your husband's being taken away, your wife. You don't know where they're going. And I can only imagine that the first thing, again, that I would want to do is go look for my family. And to me, that's how Juneteenth started. It started as a gathering, a celebration, a building of a community. And also, you finally have that family together. And if you can't find your family, you start to make a family. You start to have these gatherings. So forgive me as I go down through my little list. But one of the things that Charlie Brown did, this is going to take place in West Columbia, Texas. Okay, West Columbia, Texas was also the very first capital of Texas. Then they moved to Houston, then they moved to Austin. But West Columbia was, at the time, flourishing. If you go down there now, you wouldn't know. There's like one stoplight. But at the time, it was flourishing. Now, you had this man who was wealthy by all means, had the only telephone, only working toilet, only the person with electricity, and a black man in Texas. So, of course, he was definitely a big target. But he was not the only other person who became successful after hearing those words from the general order. You had Walter Moses Burton. Any of y'all know him? He was the first black sheriff in the United States. You had Matthew Gaines. He was a former slave community leader and a minister, and at the Republic of Texas. He served under the Republican Party, as most of them did back then, and served on the Texas Board of Representatives. These men and women are self-made and did not let any of that take them down, and they started to build a foundation that we here are standing on today. If it wasn't for those people who came up, built something for you, for me, I really don't think that we'd be here today. And so Juneteenth to me isn't just the celebration of that. It's me celebrating those who also built that path and foundation for me. And you think of the flag, you see that starburst, that right there just indicates that they are bursting of freedom and excitement, and that they are building that horizon of hope for all of us. And so that's the story that I wanted to share with you about Juneteenth and the importance behind the history and what we need to do to carry that history and that knowledge and that foundation that they built for us and keep building it for our future generation to come. Thank you.
Just a second.
Yes, sir.
Certainly, as we want to thank you for sharing.
Yes, sir.
We always leave just a little bit of time just to keep.
Oh yeah, I'm just ready to go. I'm just like, all right, have a great day. I'm sorry.
Just a few questions in
Yeah.
your experience. And just quickly, because you were mentioning to me as I ran into you, you were talking about going back. And
Yes.
there's something about being in space.
Yes.
This is one of the things that we've been wrestling with for many things that we're doing, but I often wrestling with is that there's something about space. You went back and you started to share with me a little bit about how it was impacting you.
Yes.
And we're impacted by space, we're impacted by the monuments, the artwork that all's around it. Can you share a little bit further? You began talking
Yes.
about that, and I could feel the impact.
Yes, absolutely. So when I went back to West Columbia, this was probably maybe 4 weeks ago. Previously, I'd stated that Charlie Brown had donated a piece of land. Now, again, this man was about community. So he built churches and schools and homes. And this specific land, who was donated by his granddaughter, her name was Velda, but we called her Aunt Shank because that's just what we do. I mean, I got an Aunt Chi-Chi and Aunt Shank. I don't ask questions. So Aunt Shank had donated that land, and that school was named after Charlie Brown to commemorate him and what he helped build West Columbia up to be. Because it would not be where it was if it wasn't for somebody bringing in all that economic value. When I got there, this school was in such disarray. It was sad. I almost cried. And I was with an individual who was taking me around the town, and she was showing me what has happened, what is going on within that city, and how she wanted me to help. She wanted me to help. She was like, "You are a descendant of this man who helped build this city. Help me." And I don't know how. And that was the impact. I don't know how. Because I saw this school, and as we were going to restaurants and museums, people were coming up to me and they were saying, "Help us get this school back." Because someone has this school and they are not taking care of it. They are not allowing us to use it. It's completely unsafe. There's grass that stands up this high. The playground that I used to play on as a kid is rusted and overgrown and falling apart, where my grandmother, Medea, she lived right next to it. So we just go there for family reunions and hop right on over to the playground, which no longer is able to be played on because it's dangerous. The softball fields are overgrown. The dugouts have been completely destroyed. The school windows are knocked in. The auditorium, you can see directly through it. And you can see ceiling panels starting to fall in. And when I went onto the site of this 501c3 who owns it, allegedly, and they call themselves the Charlie Brown Heritage Foundation. So naturally I got upset because I wanted to know, how is this honoring a man? How is this honoring anybody? And I reached out. I've reached out several times and I've been met with nothing. I've made calls and I've been met with nothing as well. But from my understanding, and where I got really upset, where I was telling you, is that they are a 501c3 who are actually taking in grant money, like from the Martin Luther King Foundation. They're taking that money and stating that they're using it for tutoring services and community services for that school, and it's not being used for the school. And so when they were coming to me and they were asking me for help, I live here in Richmond, Virginia. I can only do so much, but I didn't know how to help her. And I wanted to, but I don't know how. And so the impact that I went there with my eyes completely wide, being from that area and seeing it in a completely different way, because I'm learning about the history that I grew up around. I didn't know that, I'm going to school and I'm doing this and playing with my cousins, not really understanding that I'm playing on hollow ground, and that a lot of stuff has happened around me, and I come from a legacy. And I'm proud of that, because there's not a lot of Black folk that can trace their lineage all the way back to something like that. And when I saw that, and I saw how he was being honored, I was like, this is not okay. And I'm still angry about it. But I'm working through that anger and just working to try to tell his story as well as the other stories of these individuals, to try to bring honor that way, and not let them be known for a building that is now, in shambles.
Certainly, I thank you for sharing that.
Yes, sir.
I wanted to lift that because certainly as we're having these discussions, we do not want to leave out how we're all impacted in so many different ways, that we're feeling the impact. And your sharing this allows us to be able to feel just as I was in that moment. Not just that we're seeing it as words on a page, Not that just we're seeing it as recording and data, but that it has an impact upon lives and generations. And so as you're sharing that, we're talking about our artwork, we're talking about monuments, we're talking about these symbols. They have an impact. And so what we're inviting everyone to do is, of course, to join us in this work and in this effort to go with us as we continue the journey of the replacement of these windows in this moment and the moments yet to come, knowing that it will have an impact on the lives who are present today, but the work we're doing now will have an impact on the lives that will be coming behind us. This is a great, great, great granddaughter.
Great, great, great.
Right.
Yep, great, 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 great
granddaughter. We're speaking about the impact of a school, speaking about the impact of the ground and the space. Here we're replacing this South Aisle Bay because it has had an impact. We want a positive impact in the future to come by what it will be replaced by, and we're not the only ones. There are several other places where people will go, where we hope that the sacred space and public space, which is now sacred space for many individuals, will have the kind of impact that it will be just not informing, it will be transforming. So we want to say thank you for your sharing with us today, and say thank you for everyone that's coming and everyone that has been here on this day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.